You're about to hear something most people never learn. The Book of the Dead was never a book about death. It was a guide for how to live, how to stay in balance, and how to carry your heart lightly enough to survive eternity. In the next moments, you'll discover secrets that were once whispered only by priests, spells written to protect the soul, and the quiet truth behind Egypt's most misunderstood text. But before we wander into the afterlife together, take a breath, feel the room soften, and gently settle in, because tonight we're going to travel slowly, safely, through a world the ancient Egyptians believed was more real than the one we're standing in now. Hello everyone, welcome to another late night stroll through the stranger corners of history. If you found your way here, it's probably because your mind refuses to sleep. So, let's give it something quietly absurd to think about and ponder. Before we dive too deeply, a gentle nudge. If you enjoy stories that let you relax and learn at the same time, consider liking this video and subscribing to History at Bedtime. Also, feel free to leave a comment sharing your location and local time. We like to see history travel the globe alongside our viewers. Now, let's ease into tonight's journey. The Book of the Dead was never a single scroll, a single manuscript, or a single story. It was a collection of spells, lessons, and gentle protections that evolved for almost 1500 years. The Egyptians called it the Book of Coming Forth by Day because, in their understanding, death wasn't darkness. It was returning to light. In this first hour, we'll uncover why the spells existed, the major chapters hidden inside the text, how the soul moved through the Duat, the symbolic teachings that shaped Egyptian morality, the truth behind the heart's weighing, and the protection spells meant to guide the soul safely home. In the second hour, we'll explore the deeper meanings, the misunderstandings, the rituals, and the quiet wisdom that still feels alive today. For now, we begin with the simplest, softest truth. The Book of the Dead wasn't written to frighten anyone. It was written so the soul wouldn't feel alone. When the Egyptians imagined the moment of death, they didn't see a sudden darkness, or an ending, or the dissolving of everything a person knew. They saw something gentler, something almost like waking. For them, the afterlife didn't begin with terror. It began with awareness, a slow rising, as if one were merely opening their eyes after a long sleep. And this is why the first spells of the Book of Coming Forth by Day were designed for a soul that might be confused, disoriented, or unsure of where it now stood. You can imagine it, a quiet space, an endless horizon of soft golden light, the faint smell of lotus petals drifting on a still breeze, and the sense that you've left something behind, yet you don't feel afraid of it. Not yet. Spell after spell gently reminds the soul what it is, a being made of light, purpose, and memory. One spell allows the dead to open their mouth for speech. Another helps them open their eyes so they can see the path before them. Another restores breathing, slow and steady, as if a soft wind moves through the reeds of the Nile. The Egyptians believed that nothing in the afterlife should be taken for granted, not even a breath. So they wrote spells that coaxed these senses back to life, the way a parent might encourage a child waking from a deep sleep. May my mouth be opened. One text says, may my heart remember, may my limbs walk, may my shadow follow me. There is peace in these words, a reassurance that even in the realm beyond life, you have a body, a presence, a sense of shape in the quiet. Historians still debate whether these early spells were meant to reflect literal actions or symbolic awakenings of consciousness. But what remains certain is that the Egyptians imagined the afterlife as something gradual, not a jolt, not a shock, but a soft, steady reassembling of the self. It's almost comforting to think of it, the soul standing at the threshold, stretching into its new form, recalling its name, its story, its purpose. In this slow awakening, the Book of the Dead acts like a whispered voice beside you, guiding, steadying, softening everything around you. And as the soul takes its first few steps into the Duat, it carries something precious, the memory of Ma'at, the quiet, everlasting balance of truth, because soon the journey becomes more complex, and the soul will need its calm heart for what comes next. To understand the purpose of the spells, you must first understand something essential about the Egyptians. They did not fear death, they feared chaos. Chaos, to them, was not noise or confusion. It was the unraveling of meaning, the breakdown of truth, the slow erosion of harmony, the fabric that holds life together. This harmony had a name, Ma'at, a principle so important that every person from farmer to pharaoh lived with the quiet intention of keeping it alive. So the spells of the Book of the Dead existed not as charms of superstition, but as anchors of order. They helped the soul move through the afterlife without losing itself, without forgetting its name, without straying into the shadows that symbolize disorder. Each spell was a reminder you are still you. You still belong to the world of truth. You are still held by the balance of Ma'at. Some spells protected the soul from creatures of the Duat, serpents, crocodiles, strange beings with unfamiliar forms. But the creatures were not villains. They were symbols of inner challenge, of the soul's need to remain steady. Other spells defended the deceased from losing their identity. One protected the heart, ensuring it would not betray the person during judgment. Another guarded the shadow, an important part of the soul that represented presence and vitality. Yet another protected the name, one of the most sacred aspects of the self. The Egyptians believed that forgetting your name or having it erased was a kind of second death, a slow fading. So the spells acted as a thread tying the soul to its identity. The journey through the afterlife wasn't meant to be frightening. It was meant to be orderly, structured, almost ceremonial, like walking through a series of gentle thresholds, where each doorway reflects something you once learned in life. Historians still debate whether every person understood the deeper symbolism of these texts, or whether some simply saw them as tradition. But the Egyptians did not distinguish between practical and symbolic. The world was layered, and meaning was everywhere. The spells, therefore, were both protection for the soul and guidance for the mind, a way to remind the dead and the living that the universe is not hostile. It is structured, it is balanced, it is gentle when you move with it. And so, as the soul moves deeper into the Duat guided by these quiet, ancient words, it reaches the next stage of the journey, the many gates, thresholds not of stone, but of meaning, each requiring understanding, honesty, and a calm, steady heart. As the soul begins its journey through the Duat, it does not rush, it moves slowly, as though floating through a dream, carved from starlight and memory. The Duat is not a place of torment, it is a landscape layered with meaning. Rivers of shadow, fields of reeds, winding corridors, and gates that shimmer like metal heated by the sun. These gates are not physical barriers, they are thresholds of truth. In many papyri, the Book of the Dead describes 12 gates, mirroring the 12 hours of the night. Each gate is watched over by guardians, beings with names long and complex, some human, some lion-headed, some serpentine, all of them symbolic. But despite their forms, the guardians are not hostile. They are reminders. Each gate asks the soul a simple question. Do you remember who you are? The Egyptians believed that the afterlife was a place one navigated with knowledge, not fear, and so the spells provided the passwords, not magic phrases, but declarations of identity. I am one who has lived with Ma'at. I know the names of the guardians. I speak truth. I am pure. These were not boasts. They were commitments the living person had strived to fulfill long before death. The spell texts describe each gate glowing in the darkness, illuminated by the solar bark, Ra's divine boat, as it travels through the night. And the soul, walking beneath that radiant light, follows a path worn by countless others. To pass a gate, the soul must not overpower anything. It must simply recognize the guardian, address them, and stand firmly in its truth. This is why the Book of the Dead includes names, titles, and short phrases, not as magic, but as memory. Egyptologists often compare these passages to a traveler moving from room to room in a sacred temple, each chamber dim, quiet, and filled with incense. In life, a person had to walk respectfully through these spaces. In death, the soul did the same. And so each gate becomes a moment of stillness, a place to breathe, a place to remember. The journey is not about reaching the end quickly. It is about passing through each threshold with the same calm clarity that guided one's life. Historians still debate whether the gates represented literal steps in the soul's path or symbolic stages of inner purification. But perhaps it doesn't matter. For the Egyptians, the afterlife was both a place and a state of being, both real and symbolic at once. And as the soul continues through the Duat guided by these whispered spells, it arrives at something even more significant, the Hall of Ma and the weighing of the heart, a moment that has echoed for more than 3,000 years, a moment where everything becomes still. The Hall of Ma is unlike any other place described in the Book of the Dead. It is vast, a hall so wide the edges dissolve into shadow, lit only by the steady glow of an unseen horizon. The air is calm. Nothing moves quickly here. This hall is sometimes called the Hall of Two Truths, a phrase that reminds us that truth is never singular. There is the truth of what one has done and the truth of what one intended. Both matter, both carry weight. At the center of this hall stands the great scale. On one side, the heart, the eye, the core of emotion, memory, morality, and identity. The Egyptians believed the heart recorded everything a person experienced, every small kindness, every resentment, every moment of honesty, every time one failed to live in balance with Ma. On the other side, the feather of Manat, pure, white, weightless, representing universal balance. Spell 125, one of the most iconic texts in all of Egyptian literature, prepares the soul for this moment, not by offering excuses, not by offering tricks, but by offering clarity. I have not stolen, I have not lied, I have not caused tears, I have not acted in rage without cause, I have not abused the earth, I have not turned away from those in need. These statements, often called the negative confessions, are not boasts. They are the soul aligning itself with truth, promising to stand honestly before the cosmos. If the heart is lighter than the feather, if a person lived with sincerity, with balance, with a willingness to return to harmony, the soul is welcomed. If the heart is heavier, it is not punished. It is simply not able to move further. The creature known as Amit, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, the three most powerful animals of Egypt, waits silently beside the scale. If the heart fails the test, Amit consumes it, ending the soul's journey entirely. This was not hell. This was not eternal torment. This was simply the failure to continue. For the Egyptians, this was justice, quiet, impartial, balanced. Historians still debate whether Egyptians interpreted this moment literally or metaphorically, but the symbolism is unmistakably beautiful, a reminder that a life lived in truth carries no weight. And so, if the heart rises lightly, if the feather remains still, the soul is declared Manaru, true of voice. This phrase appears on countless tombs, a simple, gentle declaration that a life was lived sincerely enough to continue forward. And now, with the hall behind it and the weight of judgment lifted, the soul moves into the next part of its journey, a path shaped by transformation, protection, and rebirth. Once the soul leaves the hall of two truths, it moves into one of the most mysterious realms of the Book of the Dead, the realm of transformation. Here, the soul does not travel as a fixed being. It moves as something fluid, adaptable, capable of changing form, the way light changes when it passes through water. The Egyptians believed that the afterlife required flexibility, not physical flexibility, but spiritual. The world beyond death is vast, layered, shifting, a place where a soul may need different strengths at different moments. So the Book of the Dead included spells that allowed the deceased to become what they needed to be. There is a spell to become a falcon, soaring high above the Duat, a spell to become a heron, the bird associated with sunrise, a spell to become a lotus, symbol of rebirth, a spell to become a snake, shedding what is no longer needed, a spell to become a crocodile strong and unyielding, a spell to become air, subtle and invisible. Each transformation taught something. Each form held a truth. To become a lotus, one had to understand renewal. To become a falcon, one had to understand clarity. To become air, one had to understand presence without heaviness. The Egyptians did not treat these spells as shape-shifting fantasies. They saw them as ways for the soul to align itself with universal qualities, to move lightly through difficult places, to stand firm when needed, to rise when the path ahead seemed dim. One of the most beautiful spells, spell 83, is the spell for becoming a phoenix. The Bennu bird, as the Egyptians called it, was the symbol of the first dawn. It rose from the watery chaos at the beginning of time. Becoming the Bennu meant returning to origin, to a moment before fear existed. The spell reads softly, like a breath. I am the Bennu, the soul of Ra, who leads the blessed to light. Historians still debate whether these transformations were symbolic or literal in Egyptian belief, but the tone of the spells, the imagery, and the consistency across centuries suggest one clear idea. A soul that can change is a soul that cannot be trapped. For the Egyptians, transformation was freedom. So, with each shift, each new shape, the soul moves deeper into the underworld, not as a prisoner, not as a wanderer, but as a being learning its own flexibility. Transformation is not escape, it is growth, and the quiet, golden light of the Duat follows this soul as it glides, rises, returns, and reforms itself, preparing for the next stage of its long journey, the realm of protection. As the soul continues through the shifting landscapes of the Duat, the Book of the Dead offers a suite of spells designed not for fear, but for reassurance. Protection, for the Egyptians, was never about violence. It was about preserving balance, shielding the soul from anything that could disturb its calm or separate it from Ma'at. The Duat was beautiful, but like life, it held challenges, not monsters, exactly, but symbols of inner trials. There were serpents whose venom represented corruption. There were lakes whose waters symbolized forgetfulness. There were flames that tested clarity, and shadows that reflected doubt. And so, the spells gently guard the traveler. One spell shields the soul from snakes, not by attacking them, but by preventing their symbolic bite from taking hold. Another helps the deceased cross waters without sinking into confusion. Another calms fires that once guarded forbidden thresholds, allowing the soul to pass without fear. The Egyptians understood something profound about the mind. Fear grows in places where meaning disappears. So the Book of the Dead gives meaning to everything. A serpent is not a terror. It is a challenge to stay steady. A lake is not a threat. It is a reminder to stay awake. A flame is not harm. It is illumination. And amulets, too, played a role. The scarab beetle guarded the heart, symbolizing transformation. The ankh protected breath, the life force. The jed pillar offered stability, as steady as the spine of Osiris himself. The tiet knot of Isis brought safety and healing. Many papyri depict the deceased wearing these amulets not as decoration, but as anchors, each helping the soul maintain its center as it walked deeper into the night. One of the most comforting spells is the spell protecting the soul's shadow. The Egyptians believed a person's shadow was part of their spirit, the part that proves one's existence. If the shadow wandered or weakened, the person could lose their place in the world. The spell simply says, "May my shadow never be taken from me." It is a quiet plea, a soft hope, a desire to remain whole. Historians still debate how literally the Egyptians took these protective texts, but the emotional truth is unmistakable. The afterlife was seen as a journey the soul did not have to face alone. Each protection spell is a hand placed gently on the traveler's shoulder, a reminder that nothing in the Duat seeks to destroy them. Everything seeks to teach. And when the soul has gathered these protections, when its shadow is steady, its heart light, its identity intact, it steps into one of the most peaceful and mysterious regions of the entire Book of the Dead, the place of offerings and remembrance. The next stage of the journey unfolds like a quiet courtyard after sunset, warm light resting on stone walls, shadows pooling softly beneath low burning lamps. This is the place of offerings, where the soul is reminded of the life it once lived and of the people who cared enough to send gifts into eternity. For the Egyptians, offerings were not food in the literal sense. They were acts of memory. A loaf of bread symbolized nourishment. A jug of beer meant comfort and companionship. A cut of meat meant strength. A basket of vegetables meant abundance. A lotus blossom meant rebirth. Even the smallest clay model, a mini loaf, a simple painted onion, carried a universe of meaning. I remember you. I honor you. You are still part of my world. Many tombs contained entire walls covered in offering lists, not because the dead were hungry, but because memory itself was a kind of sustenance. In life, the Egyptians believed that remembering someone was a sacred act. In death, being remembered was protection. This is why the Book of the Dead includes the gentle phrase, "May offerings rise to me in peace. May my name be spoken on earth." The offering scene also served another purpose. It grounded the soul before the next phase of the journey, a reminder of everything familiar, everything comforting, everything human. Imagine the quiet space the soul now enters, a long stone table covered with symbolic food, soft torchlight flickering, the faint smell of incense rising in slow spirals, a cool breeze drifting from an unseen corridor. Here, the soul pauses, not to eat, but to remember the warmth of the sun on the Nile, to remember the touch of linen garments, to remember the voices of loved ones, to remember the softness of a child's hand, to remember the laughter of a market at midday, to remember the scent of fresh bread from a clay oven. For Egyptians, the afterlife was not a place of forgetting. It was a place of continuity, a gentle extension of everything that had mattered. And so the offerings become something more than sustenance. They become anchors of identity. They say, you were here, you lived, you mattered. Historians still debate whether families visited tombs frequently or only during festivals like the beautiful Feast of the Valley. But one thing is clear. Egyptians believed that love once given traveled beyond the boundaries of death, and so, with memory warming the soul, it begins the next part of the journey, a place that feels both strange and deeply familiar, the fields of reeds. The field of reeds, or the Aru, was the Egyptian vision of paradise, but not in the way many people today imagine paradise. It was not a shining, otherworldly expanse filled with clouds or distant choirs. It was something simpler, something gentler, something deeply human. The Egyptians imagined paradise as a perfected version of Egypt itself, the world they knew, softened and balanced, without pain, without injustice, without imbalance. To them, perfection was not unfamiliar. It was home at its most peaceful. So the soul enters a landscape that looks like Egypt at dawn, marshes glowing with soft golden light, tall reeds swaying in a warm breeze, fields stretching endlessly toward the horizon, water shimmering as though holding sunlight inside it. This place is calm beyond description. Even the air feels slow and steady, as though time has loosened its grip. In the field of reeds, the deceased continue the activities they loved in life. Farmers tend perfect fields. Families gather together. Fishermen cast nets into sparkling waters. Craftsmen work with tools that never break. Musicians play soft melodies on flutes and harps. Nothing is rushed. Nothing is scarce. Nothing is lost. The Egyptians believed that the afterlife was not a place to escape life's responsibilities. It was a place where work became joyful, not burdensome, where every task felt meaningful and light. A person could walk endlessly through fields that never withered, under a sky that never dimmed, surrounded by loved ones who had also reached this gentle place. This was paradise, not luxury, not wealth, but harmony, a simple, profound harmony. And at the center of it all, the soul could visit Osiris, the ruler of the blessed dead, not as a judge, but as a symbol of eternal renewal. Osiris represented life after life, the quiet strength of a seed breaking through soil, the cycle that brings dawn after every night. Historians still debate whether Egyptians literally believed they would perform fieldwork in eternity, or whether the field of reeds symbolized a state of contentment. But the imagery, repeated across tombs, texts, and art, shows how deeply the Egyptians cherished the idea of a peaceful continuation of life. No chaos, no loneliness, no fear, just a calm, clear world filled with the gentle rhythm of purpose. And yet, the journey is not over. There is more to understand, more to learn, more to become. Because the Book of the Dead also teaches that the soul strives for something beyond the field of reeds, a unity with the divine, a joining with the light, a place among the stars. That is the next step in the long, soft path ahead. Beyond the quiet peace of the field of reeds lies another realm, one that stretches far beyond marshes, fields, and familiar landscapes. It is a place where the earthly horizon dissolves completely and the soul begins to rise. The Egyptians believed that the blessed dead eventually became as spirits, luminous beings who could ascend into the sky and join the stars. This was not a transformation of ego, but of essence, a soft dissolving of heaviness, a gentle loosening of boundaries. If the field of reeds was where the soul remembered life, the stars were where it remembered its origin. For the Egyptians, the night sky was not empty. It was filled with the souls of the justified, tiny sparks of consciousness moving with the rhythm of the universe. The Milky Way was imagined as a celestial river, the heavenly Nile, flowing endlessly across the night. The stars were the lights of countless ancestors who had walked the path before, to become an heir meant to shine, to be free from all earthly weight, to be radiant, electric, timeless. Spell after spell in the Book of the Dead describes this transformation, the soul becoming a star in the eastern sky, a shining one, a light that rises and never fades. One spell says softly, "I am a star which does not die." Another whispers, "I join the imperishable ones." These imperishable ones were the stars that never fell below the horizon, the circumpolar stars, symbols of eternity, constancy, unbroken presence. The Egyptians believed that joining these stars meant achieving a state of pure balance, a place where the soul no longer moved from life to life, challenge to challenge. It simply was bright, steady, clear. Imagine floating upward in the quiet darkness of the Duat, the ground beneath slowly dissolving, the air thinning, the world opening into infinite space. Imagine rising through the constellations, the sky turning from deep indigo to soft silver, the light of ancient souls shimmering like fireflies. There is no fear here, no pressure, only the gentle certainty that the universe is vast and you are safe within it. Historians still debate whether Egyptians saw this stellar transformation as literal or symbolic, but the consistency of the imagery, birds with human heads, stars drawn atop human figures, funerary texts full of cosmic maps, suggests a truth deeper than literal interpretation. To become a star meant you lived in balance, you became light, and light never dies. And yet, this was still not the final stage, because even among the stars, the soul had one more union to seek, a return to Ra, the solar force that moved through sky and underworld alike, a light that brought order to all things. The Egyptians believed that each night the sun god Ra traveled through the Duat, sailing in his solar bark, bringing light through the deepest shadows. This was not a myth of fear, it was a myth of reassurance. If the sun could pass through darkness and rise again, so could the soul. And so, in the later passages of the Book of the Dead, the deceased joins Ra on his nightly voyage, not as a servant or a passenger, but as a companion of the divine. The solar bark moves slowly, smoothly, carrying the warmth of sunlight into the vast stillness of the night. The journey is gentle. At each hour, the boat glides into a new region, a cavern of quiet shadow, a chamber adorned with radiant deities, a stretch of water reflecting starlight, a field where serpents sleep in coils of silence. On this journey, Ra is not the fierce sun of noon. He is the soft sun of midnight, glowing, calm, introspective. The deceased stands near him, feeling the warmth that radiates, not from flame, but from presence, a warmth that feels like recognition, connection, continuity. Along this path, the soul witnesses Ra confronting Apophis, the great serpent of chaos, not in a violent battle, but in a symbolic act of restoring balance. Chaos rises, order responds, light continues forward. The Egyptians did not frame this as good defeating evil. They saw it as a cycle, a rhythm, a breath. Just as a person inhales and exhales, so did the cosmos move between order and disorder, light and shadow, action and rest. The soul learns from this journey that order is not something imposed. It is something maintained gently, steadily, through awareness. By joining Ra, the soul shares in the sun's resilience. It learns that light is not a possession. It is a path, a rhythm, a way of being. Historians still debate how much of this solar journey was meant literally or symbolically, but the emotional truth is unmistakable. The Egyptians found comfort in the idea that the sun never ceased its cycle. It always rose. It always returned. It always found its way through the darkness. And by joining Ra, the soul becomes part of that cycle, a presence moving rhythmically through eternity, never lost, never forgotten, never without purpose. From here, the soul moves towards its final stages, union with Osiris, the quiet renewal of self, and the last soft revelation that the Egyptians believed defined existence itself. After traveling with Ra through the quiet corridors of the Duat, the soul reaches one of the most meaningful moments in the Egyptian vision of the afterlife, the union with Osiris, the god of renewal, resurrection, and peaceful eternity. Osiris is not a distant, fearsome presence. He is gentle, quiet, steady, a symbol of life restored after loss, balance restored after chaos, and light restored after shadow. In temple reliefs and funerary papyri, Osiris is often shown seated on a throne in a calm, dignified pose, enveloped in white linen, holding the crook and flail, symbols of kingship and care. But to the Egyptians, Osiris was not just a king. He was the embodiment of transformation. He had died. He had risen. He had become eternal. And so, when the deceased approaches Osiris, it is not as a subject approaching a ruler, but as a soul approaching the one who understands what they have undergone. The scene is serene. The throne room glows with soft green and gold, colors associated with rebirth. The air feels cool, like the shade beneath a sycamore tree in the heat of afternoon. Incense burns in gentle spirals. Lotus flowers float in shallow pools around the dais. Osiris does not speak. He does not judge. That has already been done in the Hall of Ma'at. Instead, he welcomes. He symbolizes the next step, the acceptance of eternal life, the acceptance of renewal. The deceased becomes part of his retinue, joining countless others who achieved balance and truth. Here, the soul learns the final lesson of Egyptian belief. Death is not an ending, it is a continuation. Historians still debate whether Egyptians believed the soul literally met Osiris, or whether he represented a state of perfected order. But the emotional call is unmistakable. In Osiris, the soul sees itself wounded, restored, transformed, and as this understanding deepens, something inside the soul softens. The tension of the journey dissolves. The worries of earthly life fade. Even the idea of time itself loosens its grip. In the presence of Osiris, the soul is reminded that it belongs to something ancient, cyclical, and tender. And once this union settles fully into the spirit, the journey continues into a place that many Egyptians found even more comforting: the Garden of the Blessed. The Garden of the Blessed, sometimes described in tomb art and in later funerary papyri, is one of the most soothing landscapes in the entire Egyptian afterlife. It is not a place of grandeur, not a realm of shining palaces or towering monuments. It is something more intimate, a garden shaped by peace. Here, the air is warm but gentle, as though touched by the breath of spring. Trees sway slowly, their leaves catching soft rays of sunlight that filter through branches. The sound of water is constant and calming. Small channels winding between flower beds, reflecting light in rippling patterns. Lotus blossoms float in shallow pools. Papyrus reeds whisper softly as they bend under the weight of the breeze. Figs, dates, pomegranates, and grapes grow in quiet abundance. Birds glide overhead, herons, ibises, doves, their movements slow, their calls muted by the peacefulness of the place. Here, nothing is rushed, nothing is scarce, nothing is demanded. The Garden of the Blessed is not a place of reward in the moralistic sense. It is a place where the soul finally feels safe. Safe from chaos, safe from uncertainty, safe from the weight of earthly sorrows. The Egyptians believed that in this garden, the deceased could spend eternity doing what brought them contentment, tending vines, watering fruit trees, gathering flowers, walking barefoot through soft grass, resting beneath branches heavy with shade. This may seem simple, but for Egyptians, simplicity was sacred. The most important things in life were not grand achievements, they were moments of balance, harmony, order, quiet purpose. One spell even describes the soul receiving a small wooden hoe so they can cultivate the fields of the afterlife, not as labor, but as joyful participation in the world. Historians still debate whether this garden was meant to represent a literal place, an idealized memory of Egypt, or a state of perfect inner peace. But across millennia, the imagery remains consistent. Paradise is a garden, a place of life, a place of growth, a place of softness, and yet the journey is not finished, because after the garden comes the last revelations. The Book of the Dead offers teachings about the nature of the soul, its many components, and how they weave together into something eternal. This is where we now turn. To the ancient Egyptians, the soul was not a single, simple thing. It was a constellation, a woven tapestry of many parts, each with its own nature, its own purpose, and its own journey. Understanding the Book of the Dead means understanding these parts, because every spell, every symbol, every teaching gently guides one or more of them toward wholeness. The Egyptians believed the soul had several components, but 5 in particular shaped its eternal path: the Ka, the Ba, the Ib, the Ren, and the Sheut. Each part was essential, each held meaning, each needed care. The Ka, life force. The Ka was the spark of energy that animated a person. In life, it was sustained through food, water, sunlight, and the presence of loved ones. In death, it still needed nourishment, which is why offerings continued long after burial. Bread, beer, lotus flowers, cool water. Not literal sustenance, but symbolic acts of remembrance. For the Egyptians, remembering someone meant feeding their Ka. The Ba, personality, freedom, movement. The Ba was the aspect of the soul that could travel. It often appeared in art as a human-headed bird, free to move between the world of the living and the world of the dead. The Ba carried emotions, preferences, memories. It was the part of the soul that still cared, still wondered, still felt joy. Spells allowed the Ba to leave the tomb by day and return safely by night. It was the bridge between worlds. The Ib, the heart, seat of morality. The Ib was the heart, not a symbol, but the actual heart of the person. The Egyptians believed it recorded everything a person experienced. It thought, it remembered, it judged, and so the heart was the only organ left inside the body during mummification. It would be needed in the Hall of Ma'at. The Ren, the name. The Ren was a person's name, perhaps the most delicate part of the soul. As long as someone spoke your name, you lived. If your name was forgotten, erased, or never spoken again, the Egyptians feared that part of the soul would fade. This is why so many tombs, monuments, and papyri repeat the deceased's name over and over. Carved into stone, written on linen, painted on coffins. A name was a lifeline, a soft tether connecting memory to eternity. The sheut, the shadow, the sheut or shadow, was the silent companion every person carried, not just a silhouette, but a reflection of existence. The Egyptians believed losing your shadow meant losing a piece of your identity. So the Book of the Dead includes spells to protect it from wandering away, a soul of many threads. Historians still debate how precisely Egyptians distinguished these parts and whether every person understood the full philosophy behind them. But the emotional truth is clear. A person was not just one thing, they were many. A single life held countless layers, countless memories, countless reflections of meaning, and the Book of the Dead, in its gentle wisdom, sought to keep all these parts together, unified, balanced, and safe. As the soul continued its journey, these parts became clearer, lighter, and more at peace. And with every step, every memory, every quiet revelation. The soul moved closer to the final, deepest teaching of all, the understanding of Mawat, the heart of the Egyptian universe. Ma was more than a goddess, more than a symbol, more than a concept. Mat was the pulse of the Egyptian world, the invisible rhythm that kept the universe steady, the breath that held creation together, the truth that guided both life and eternity. To understand Ma is to understand everything the Egyptians believed about existence. Mat meant balance, balance between action and rest, between giving and receiving, between truth and compassion. Mat meant harmony, the way the Nile flooded each year, the way the sun rose and set, the way seasons shifted without fail. Mer meant justice, not punishment, not harshness, but fairness, a sincerity of heart. Ma meant truth, not factual accuracy alone, but living honestly, speaking clearly, acting in ways that honored one's own spirit. The Egyptians did not believe a person had to be perfect. They believed a person had to be aligned. A heavy heart was not a sinful heart. It was a heart off balance, burdened, weighed down by things left unresolved. The goal of life was not to avoid mistakes. It was to restore harmony whenever disharmony appeared. This is why the negative confessions in spell 125 feel less like rules and more like reflections. I have not spoken falsely. I have not shut my ears to truth. I have not turned away from those in need. I have not caused needless pain. These statements are not demands. They are invitations, reminders of how a person can live in a way that feels whole. And as the soul continues walking through the afterlife, it realizes something beautiful. Mad is not just the measure of life, it is the measure of peace. When one lives with Ma at, the world moves smoothly. The heart becomes light. The shadow stays close. The car is nourished. The bar moves freely. The name is spoken with love. Historians still debate whether Mat was seen as a cosmic law or a moral philosophy, but to the Egyptians, the distinction didn't matter. Mat was simply the way things are meant to be, and in the quiet glow of the Duat, surrounded by timeless stars, the gentle warmth of Ra, the steady presence of Osiris, the soft gardens, the endless fields, the soul finally begins to understand. Mad is not something one performs, it is something one becomes. And with this understanding, the soul steps toward the next stage of its long, gentle journey, the weaving of destiny and memory, the scroll of what has been and what will be. As the soul moves deeper into the quiet vastness of the Duat, it reaches a place the Egyptians described with the gentlest of images, a long hall lined with scrolls, softly illuminated by an unseen glow. Not a hall of judgment, not a hall of fear, but a hall of remembrance. In this place, the soul encounters the idea of sheut, destiny, fate, the thread that winds through a lifetime. But to the Egyptians, destiny was not rigid. It was not written in stone. It was written the way one writes on papyrus, patiently, gently, with room for correction. Every life, they believed, was shaped by choices, by relationships, by truth by balance. So, destiny was not something done to you. It was something you created with every act of Maret. The scrolls in this hall are not literal documents, though many tomb walls depict scribes recording the deeds of the deceased. They are symbolic. They represent the way memory intertwines with intention and how the universe quietly watches. Imagine the hall now, wide and silent, filled with soft drifting dust, papyrus scrolls stacked in tall niches, each one glowing faintly, each carrying a lifetime within it. Some scrolls represent joy, some represent sorrow, some represent choices made quickly, others represent decisions that changed everything. And the soul, moving through this space, realizes something profound. Every moment mattered, not because of consequence, but because every moment left a shape, a soft imprint that formed the story of one's life. In Egyptian belief, this scroll, this tapestry of memories and choices, traveled with the soul, not to accuse or to judge, but to accompany, to remind the soul of who it had been and to guide who it might become. Historians still debate how Egyptians understood fate. Some texts describe destiny as assigned at birth. Others show destiny bending, responding to Ma'at, changing with the flow of life. But the Book of the Dead suggests a calmer truth. Destiny is not fixed, it is lived, and so the soul walks through this hall of memory, feeling no regret, no fear, no urgency, just a soft awareness that every experience, every kindness, every sorrow, every attempt at truth has shaped the gentle light that now surrounds it. With this understanding, the soul steps beyond the scrolls, where the next part of the journey waits, the quiet encounter with divinities, not as judges, but as guardians of cosmic harmony. Beyond the hall of memory lies a place the Egyptians called the Divine Council, a gathering of gods who represent the principles of existence, not an assembly of power, not a tribunal, but a circle of presence. Here, the soul encounters deities who shaped every corner of Egyptian life, symbols of protection, creativity, knowledge, healing, and harmony. Thoth, keeper of words and wisdom. Thoth, often depicted with the head of an ibis, was the scribe of the gods, the recorder of truth, the master of language, the weaver of spells. In the afterlife, Thoth represents clarity of thought. He is the unbroken thread, the quiet memory of everything a soul has spoken or believed. His presence is calming, steady, measured. Hathor, the gentle one, lady of joy. Hathor embodies comfort, music, affection, and softness. She is the warmth of sunlight on one's skin, the sound of laughter, the sweetness of peace. To meet Hathor in the afterlife is to be reminded of every moment the heart felt held, every embrace, every melody, every kindness. Anubis, guardian of the lost and the found. Anubis is often misunderstood. People imagine him as stern, frightening, but in Egyptian belief, he is gentle, a protector, a guide of souls through unfamiliar lands. In this council, Anubis stands as a symbol of safety. He is the reminder that no soul journeys alone. Ma'at, balance made visible. And then there is Ma'at herself, the principle of truth, the feather of justice, the embodiment of universal harmony. Her presence is soft but unshakable. She does not speak. She simply is. Her silence teaches more than words ever could. Her stillness is instruction, the council's role. Historians still debate whether Egyptians believed the deceased literally stood before the gods in dialogue, but the symbolism is unmistakable. To reach this council is to understand that the soul is made of many reflections: wisdom, joy, protection, balance, memory. The council is not a test. It is a reunion, a homecoming of the parts of the universe that shaped the person's life. The gods do not ask questions. They offer presence. They reflect back to the soul what it has become. Steady, clear, light as Mazat's feather, a soft revelation. Standing in the quiet glow of this companionship, the soul realizes something beautiful. The gods were never separate from life. They were woven into every moment, every breath, every truth. And with this final understanding, the soul feels ready for the last steps, the serene merging of all parts of the self, and the soft crossing into eternal peace. As the soul leaves the quiet chamber of the divine council, it enters the final corridor of the Duat, a place the Egyptians described as soft, luminous, and without edges. Here, the air feels weightless, as though it has been warmed by centuries of breath. The ground beneath the soul is neither stone nor sand, but something softer, something that feels like memory made physical. For the Egyptians, this final corridor represented the most delicate transformation of all, the joining of the Ka and the Ba. Throughout life, these two aspects of the soul worked together silently, the Ka representing life force, presence, groundedness, and the Ba representing freedom, mobility, emotion, individuality. In death, they moved along different paths, each part with its own responsibilities, but in the deepest part of the Du, they return to one another. The moment of their union creates the Ak, the shining one, the fully realized soul capable of existing in all realms at once, earth, sky, and the afterlife. The texts describe this union with gentle imagery, a bird settling into the branches of a familiar tree, a flame joining with another flame until both shine brighter, two streams merging into one, losing nothing of themselves in the process. As the Ka and Ba approach each other, the space around them shifts. Time loosens. The corridor widens into a horizon. Soft light gathers at their edges, like dawn resting on the surface of water. This joining is not dramatic. It is calm, slow, beautiful. When the Ka and Ba touch, there is no sound, only the sensation of becoming whole. Everything the person once was, their thoughts, their laughter, their joys, their regrets, their memories, their quiet moments of kindness, folds together into a single, steady presence. This is the A, a soul clarified, a soul at peace, a soul that no longer needs to navigate or transform or protect itself. Historians still debate whether the Egyptians saw this union as a literal event or a symbolic representation of spiritual completeness. But in every spell, every vignette, every carved image, the meaning remains constant. When the soul becomes the Ak, it becomes light, unbound, capable of eternity. The newly formed Ak can now dwell among the stars, accompany Ra on his solar bark, rest in the garden of the blessed, or visit the world of the living through dreams and memory. Nothing is closed to it. Nothing is forbidden. Nothing is lost. And with this final inner transformation, the soul moves toward the last, softest part of its journey, the gentle crossing into eternal peace. The last passage of the journey opens not into a corridor, nor a hall, nor a field, but into something the Egyptians described simply as the beautiful West, the land where the sun sleeps, the place where everything quiet returns. Here the world grows softer, colors fade into warm gold and deep blue like twilight painted across an endless horizon. The air is cool but comforting, like the breath of evening drifting over the Nile. A faint scent of lotus and resin hangs in the space, grounding the soul in familiarity. This is the place where all paths meet, where journeys end not with closure, but with continuation, where the Akar settles into its eternal rhythm. There are no gates here, no judges, no tasks, only peace. The Egyptians imagined this place with touching gentleness. They saw loved ones greeting one another without hurry. They saw houses built beside calm waters. They saw gardens that flourished forever. They saw a life renewed, expanded, softened, and in this eternal landscape, the soul finally rests. The Book of the Dead ends not with triumph, but with quiet belonging, a sense of ease, a sense of returning home. Here, the ark shines. It moves freely. It remembers everything it ever was, and everything it has now become. No fear, no weight, no night too long, no journey too difficult, only equilibrium, the perfect expression of Ma'at. Historians still debate whether this final place was meant to be literal or visionary, but the emotional truth is unmistakable. The Egyptians believed that peace was possible, that life could continue in beauty, that the soul, when balanced, could rest without end. And now, as we complete this journey, we ease into the final wind down, a soft fade into quiet sleep. And now, as the lights of the Duat settle into a gentle shimmer, you can let the journey slowly drift into the background of your thoughts, letting every image soften, letting every sound grow quieter, as if the entire world is exhaling around you in one long, peaceful breath. You've walked through halls of memory, crossed fields of reeds, touched the quiet calm of gardens and stars, and now all of it begins to dissolve into a warm, weightless haze, like mist rolling across still water at the very edge of dawn. There is no need to hold on to the details, no need to recall each step or symbol. You can simply allow the feeling to remain, the sense of calm balance, of ancient order, of being held gently in a world shaped by harmony. Every part of the journey has led here to this slow and tranquil resting place at the edge of the beautiful West, where the air is cool and steady, and time seems to stretch outward into a soft, endless horizon. Your breath can slow now. Your mind can loosen. The stories of gods and stars, of spells and gardens, of rivers and featherlight truths, all of them can settle like quiet sand in the bottom of an hourglass that no longer needs to turn. The world becomes dimmer, calmer, simpler. The night folds around you with the same gentleness the Egyptians imagined when they pictured the soul settling under a sky full of eternal light. And as you drift, you can let yourself feel weightless, steady, unburdened, carried by the same calm that guided countless souls across the ages. Nothing pulls at you now. Nothing asks for your attention. Only the slow rhythm of breath, the soft, dark behind your eyelids, and the comforting sense that you are exactly where you need to be, easing gently, quietly, peacefully into sleep.